Hi, welcome to this astrology report for June 16th through 19th, 2025. We're talking about the Monday through Thursday astrology today, our sort of weekday report. So the feeling this morning, Monday morning, as I record this, really relates to the two squares that we're coming off of that happened over the weekend. I'm going to go ahead and put these up on the chart. My hope is that if you are learning astrology and following along in the chart is helpful for you or interesting for you, that this works for you. And if you just want to hear the astrology and sort of participate with that, then I hope that this works for you as well. That's always my intention, for you to just be able to ignore the chart if the chart isn't something you really want to follow along with, and enjoy following along with it if you do. Hopefully this report works for everyone. Okay, so we had two squares over the weekend. We had a square between Jupiter and Saturn and between Uranus and Mars. And I would like to point out that this is actually a chart for Tuesday, and these squares are still fully in effect, right? We have Jupiter at 1 degree, Saturn at 1 degree. We have Mars at 29 degrees, Uranus at 29 degrees. So this energy is still active the beginning of the week. And this was a tense aspect for sure. It can be a feeling of, I need to do something, I need to say something. It can be quick anger, sort of surprising actions, things coming up suddenly. And then when we have Jupiter, that's sort of more about the Mars Uranus. When we have Jupiter and Saturn as well, it's like it's happening sort of in the collective a little bit. It's something that's going on sort of in the world. We're moving forward, but in sort of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back, foot on the brake, foot on the gas kind of fashion, which can feel unpleasant, right? You can feel like you're sort of being pulled in two different directions. I did a report for the past weekend. If you're interested in diving into that more, that is still up on my channel. I will actually leave it in the current astrology section for the next couple of days, because these two squares are active. But here's the thing, they have already perfected. They perfected on Sunday. On Sunday, these squares became exact, and now they're fading away. They're starting to separate. And so that is a cooling down of these energies. The way that it was explained to me that I remember the most is about a teapot boiling, right? A water boiling, but I like the idea of a teapot that whistles. And so as we're coming up to that boil, there's that moment where, okay, the water's boiling, the teapot's whistling. That's the sort of big culmination, it all coming together moment. Once we're at that point, uh, the sort of heat gets turned off, and the teapot and the water begins to cool. So it's moving in the other direction still, especially at the beginning of the week. If you're feeling a little out of sorts, to say the least, if you're just feeling a little off, if your energy feels a little funny, or if you notice that around you a little bit and other people, understand that makes sense. And I think that it's always just good to know when things are a little bit more likely to like pop off. It's helpful to kind of have the warning that, that we have a Mars Uranus square, that people can be quick to anger, that things can come up suddenly that really surprise you, that people are feeling this sort of need to take action, and there's some frustration around the timing with this Jupiter-Saturn square as well. But these energies are behind us. We're beginning to let them go. So even though they're both still very, very active right now, we are sort of letting them go and moving on, which is awesome. A really nice signature that's coming in this week. I'm really excited about this. is Mars is moving into Virgo. Not there yet. Oops. Not there yet at the time of this recording, but making his way. So Mars enters Virgo on Tuesday, on the 17th. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited about this because basically Mars has been in these two houses forever, because we had a retrograde. So not literally forever, but since the fall, like since like September, Mars, let me put this, because this is what happens with a retrograde, and I think that it's helpful sometimes to see it on the chart. Okay, so usually Mars goes around the wheel, right? Mars travels through the houses and spends about 6 to 8 weeks in each house. But when we have a retrograde, like we just did, Mars was moving around, and then in the fall of 24, entered Cancer, moved through Cancer, entered Leo, turned retrograde, went back through Leo and Cancer, then turned direct, went back again through Cancer and Leo, and now is finally about to move on to Virgo. So we normally have Mars in a sign for, 7 weeks-ish, 8 weeks. But with this, we've had Mars there for months and months and months in these two signs. So to be able to move on to a different story, this astrology report is relevant for all signs. We're talking about what the planets are doing in the collective, how it affects your individual chart is really important if you know where you have planets and points, but there's also something that we can just say about like sort of the feel of things and the astrology of what's happening in the world here. And Mars is about like, let me just say what the Mars retrograde was about. How about that? While Mars was moving backwards, especially, our energy might have felt really low. Motivation might have felt a little bit low. Like our confidence can kind of be down. Mars is kind of our drive, our will, why we do things, how we do things. And when Mars is retrograde, it's almost like Mars is taking a nap or something. Mars is going inward. Mars is not doing any of those things. It's doing other things. So you may have had themes come up when Mars was in Cancer, for example, about family, working on themes about family, about home, about emotions. There's a lot of feeling energy to Mars retrograde in Cancer. And then in Leo, sometimes that can be sort of issues about creativity. There can just be drama with Mars and Leo. You may have had some sort of drama in your life. We can also be working with themes about visibility and being seen. And this shows up in so many different ways for different people. But we confront the idea of what it means to be sort of in the spotlight in some kind of a way. And that could be through a difficult experience, or it could be from pride coming up and wanting that recognition and not necessarily receiving it, realizing how much we need it. Whatever it is, now we've gone through, like if you think back for the last 9 months or so, especially sort of over the winter and early spring, if there was a part of your life where you've been putting a lot of effort in and trying really hard, but it was sort of hard to see progress, or it just felt like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Why am I using that analogy again? We're in a completely different part of the chart, but I feel like it applies here. It's hard to get something off the ground when Mars is retrograde. If you had something like that going on, now that Mars is direct, now that Mars is moving on to Virgo, you may have a real relief from that. This is part of why I'm saying that it's all starting to make sense. You can sort of let go of those Mars retrograde themes and begin to integrate them into just the way you live your life. And Mars in Virgo, nothing is better about getting stuff done than Mars in Virgo. This is getting stuff done. This is checking stuff off a list. It's like the opposite of Mars retrograde in Leo and Cancer. It is Mars direct in Virgo. It is getting things accomplished. Really attending to the practical sides of life, sort of being helpful to others and ourselves, not emotionally, but through practical means, cleaning out a closet or something, or getting a project off the ground that maybe did feel stunted for a little while, taking some forward moving actions with greater ease. So I love that. And we also have, at the same time as this, still building off of this, I'm just going to get rid of the retrograde circle because that's hard to focus with. We also have Venus in Taurus. Let me just add a circle for Venus in Taurus. We have Venus in Taurus, and Venus had been retrograde as well in these past months. And Venus was retrograde in Aries and Pisces and now has moved on to Taurus, a very similar story. And so I feel like that Venus retrograde stuff is clearing up too, where we may have confronted how to find our own voice in relationships, in what we find beautiful, in what we like, in what we desire, how to go after what we value and what we love and what we want and what we connect with. Any relationship challenges that may have come up, it's both of those retrogrades letting up now feels like a big relief. So not only this week do we have those squares fading that I talked about at the beginning of the report, but we also have Mars now joining Venus in terms of being into a new story after the retrogrades that were so active earlier this year or at the end of last year. And that's allowing us to move forward and move on in a different way from these retrogrades. And one thing that I really like too, one of my very favorite things happening in this sky is this Jupiter in Cancer. Talk about a positive signature. So Jupiter has moved into Cancer, and this week on the 18th, Jupiter will be squaring Neptune exactly, but I'll add that in now, even though I'm not quite ready to talk about it just yet. I want to just talk about Jupiter and Cancer first, but I want to show you what I mean. So Neptune is here in Aries. That's a pretty big deal. And Saturn is right there alongside Neptune. They are conjunct, essentially. It is not exact, and it won't be for some time, but Saturn and Neptune are traveling together right now, and I really don't feel like we can isolate either of those signatures. I think they are showing up together right now. They are, they can't be separated. So Jupiter is squaring Saturn and Neptune this week. And I think that what I really want to say is that Jupiter now being in Cancer. Remember we talked before about how Mars retrograde happened here? This is another reason why I think that we're moving on from any difficulty that might have happened at that time. Because Jupiter also now is coming into Cancer for this healing. Jupiter is the greater benefic. This is a planet that where it's traveling, it signifies expansion and growth and leveling up, maturing, developing, progressing. And when Jupiter is in Cancer, it's Jupiter's favorite place to be. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. And so the thing that I love the most about it is the way that it's helping us to develop some feelings of emotional security, deepen our feelings of security. You know, that feeling of safety and belonging and being at home, where when you're around someone or you're in a certain location or wherever it is, you might as well be home. You just feel completely yourself and relaxed. Not that you've stopped trying or being your best self at all. You're still very on point, very um, present, and trying hard, but you feel comfortable and safe and secure. Jupiter and Saturn suggest that we're all valuing that more this year, not just this week. And we are all working toward getting more and more of that this year. So we have Jupiter positively placed. We have Venus positively placed right now. These are the two benefics. When they are both happy, it helps us to find some happiness and some comfort. So as much as those squares were so difficult over the weekend, something may have come up. As much as you might be feeling a little off, even at the beginning of the week, I think especially as we move through the week, there's more and more of this available, but I think it's available the whole time because Jupiter and Venus are both well placed, to say the least. And I think that there's something about the Jupiter square to Saturn and Neptune that also suggests that we're starting to figure things out in some kind of way, that we're making sense of all that has happened differently. Something is really shifting in the Aries part of your chart. If you know the part of your chart that Aries rules, or if you have planets in the early degrees of Aries, whatever you have going on here, something is really happening there with the Saturn and the Neptune. And, you know, I understand the idea that it can be something difficult, right? Saturn can bring delays, especially at first. And Neptune can dissolve. Neptune can take things away. So even just the way that we've been back and forth across this Pisces threshold, there can be endings that are making way for new beginnings at this time. And I understand that. So if you're experiencing any of that, know that that's making way for something new moving forward. But I also think that sometimes we are too quick to drop the more positive sides of the Neptune signature. There is something deeply spiritual about Neptune. And this could be like a real feeling of divine alignment with what you want. Really feeling connected to what's changing in this Aries part of your chart. You know, Neptune aspects can be about connecting and dissolving in that sense, you know, connecting with another in a way that is on a higher level, connecting with, you know, your work, let's say, if this is falling in your career house, on a higher level. I do think that this week it might still be a little hard for us to know exactly what this Saturn, Neptune, Aries house story is really about. Because when Neptune is there, it's just hard for us to see it. But something is shifting in that Aries house. And I think that with Jupiter in this square to them this week, we might be maybe getting a little bit of an opportunity to see what's changing, to see the direction we're going in, and just to make sense of everything that's happened in recent days. You know, there's a lot of positive energy with Neptune and Aries as well. It's not all negative. We're also this week at the end of Gemini season. The sun will be moving into Gemini at the beginning of the weekend. We will talk about that then. But it's been a busy time. When we have Gemini season, we're busy. We've been busy, and we're going to be busy still this week. Often with Gemini, I feel like I have to do things twice. You know, you have to meet with people twice. You have to have the conversation twice. You have two different things you're considering. You have two different places you have to stop on the way. It's just so busy, and there can be new ideas and new information. You can be curious about things that you weren't before. There's something about Gemini season that I don't love as much as I love Geminis. There's something about Gemini season that is so cerebral. It's so heady. It's such an air sign, time, and it just doesn't feel very embodied. I think that with Jupiter and Cancer, it's sort of helpful, and we're starting to tap into that. But when when the sun moves into Cancer over the weekend, we'll feel a really different feeling. The last few weeks have been busy, a lot's been going on, and I do think that this week we begin to make sense of it a little bit. I'm going to attach at the end of the video here two other videos that I did, one about Venus and Taurus and one about Jupiter in Cancer. Those are great energies to tap into right now. That's where the positivity is. So if you can sort of like lean in those directions, that would be well supported. I will link them here as soon as this video uploads, or you can find them on my channel. There's also horoscopes there, which are a little bit more polished than these casual reports. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful week.